Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Can I try and call you to order? Look, if Joe O'Sullivan can be quiet, the rest of you can. Welcome, everybody, to Resolution's Family Practice Conference, formerly known as the DR, or Dispute Resolution Conference, latterly the Future Family Practice Conference, but because DR is so mainstream, we are calling this the Family Practice Conference, because the future is here and now. I am David Emerson from Anthony Gold Solicitors in London, a mediator and a collaborative lawyer and part-time district judge. But I'm also chair of Resolution's Dispute Resolution Committee, which is why I'm chairing this event. Thank you all for joining us today for the start of the Family Practice Conference. It's the first time we've been together for 3 years, and it's wonderful that we're able to host this conference in person. I must say that it's wonderful to see you all in 3D, rather than a box screen, rather like blankety blank, if people remember that from many years ago. I'm pleased to say we have a sellout here, and that is not a quasi-Cartain budget. This is because we've done very well with the tickets. I'd also like to pay tribute to people who have made the effort to come here, notwithstanding the rail strikes. Fortunately, it looks as if the majority of you have made it here. We've got a packed programme over the next 2 days, and we'll be putting innovative family dispute resolution under the microscope. We'll start with our dispute resolution question time, where we'll be asking our expert panel to imagine themselves as the new Family Justice Minister in Liz Truss's government. Quite what they did to deserve such a fate is unclear, but at least if they propose something that turns out to be vastly unpopular, they can ditch it at the first opportunity. This session lasts 90 minutes, which is longer than some recent ministerial appointments. Our panel will discuss the changes they'd make to the way lawyers and family practitioners deal with out-of-court options. You can get involved, either by asking questions from the floor or contribute to the debate on Twitter. Make sure, please, you mention Resolution's account, which is Res Family Law. If you just type in @Res, lots of other resolution groups will come up. I'm not saying you shouldn't include them, but if you add Res Family Law, then the main account comes up. And please use the hashtag FPConf22. And you can be famous on the Twitter wall here, but please keep it clean, and we'll see whether we can get FPConf trending. I'm now going to hand you over to Resolution's National Chair, Juliette Harvey.
Hello everyone. I'd just like to take a moment to welcome you all to what's my first in-person family practice conference. So Dave's already trailed what's happening over the next couple of days, but without further ado, let's start our plenary session this afternoon. Now, those of you who've studied your conference programme, and I know that lots of you did before you arrived today, will know that the subject of this debate is, if you were the next Family Justice Minister, well, nobody wants that job, do they? But if you were, what changes would you make to the way lawyers deal with out-of-court options? I'm delighted to be joined today by wonderful colleagues from our resolution community. James Perry. Perry, my iPad has changed your name to Perrier. I'm so sorry, James. That's because you called me Julie in an email. So, James Perry. For those of you who don't know, it's a cardinal sin to get my name wrong. James Perry, Karen Doverston, and Rebecca Hawkins. James will be known to many of you already, consistently ranked in the legal directories, including the Legal 500 Hall of Fame. James is an arbitrator, a mediator, and winner of Resolution's first John Cornwell Award in 2014. There were some other very good nominations that year, just saying. James describes himself, according to his website, as hard-working, technical, well-connected, strategic, professional, and discreet. I also know he never sleeps. His mediation practice has been acknowledged by senior judiciary and has both conducted and acted on many arbitrations. After James, we have Karen Doveston. Now, like James, Karen's previously served on Resolution's National Committee. She's the current chair of the Law Society Family Law Committee. And again, like James, Karen's a member of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, and she's the present vice chair for the Forum of Family Arbitrators. Now, there's lots I could say about Karen, but I'll keep it clean. We first met at an HMCTS meeting many years ago when we were first told about the proposed changes coming to the divorce system and about this thing called a portal. Now, I learnt at that session that, like me, Karen's never slow to voice her opinion, and she can and does voice it very loudly. Karen and I regularly meet HMCTS at various stakeholder events and user groups, and we regularly take them to task, and I mean take them to task, on behalf of our respective members. We also meet the President regularly and do not hold back in ensuring that he's kept up to date with members' views and concerns, even if people do tell us we were a bit forthright later. But there we go. And finally, we move to Rebecca Hawkins of Mediation Now. As you may have gathered, Rebecca's a child and family mediator. She's also a collaborative lawyer. And in her last firm, she worked her way up, this is according to your website, I hope it's right, from joining as a trainee solicitor, and I won't say when, to managing partner before leaving to join Mediation Now. My typing is terrible. Rebecca is actively involved with the Law Society's Family Law and Mediation panels, and she's also a member of Resolution's Litigant in Person Committee, which is where we first met. Rebecca juggles her busy mediation practice together with a traditional practice and an equally busy home life, so she's well aware of the pressures that many of us are working under. We all know that Resolution has sought to change the landscape of family law over the past 40 years. If you were at National Conference in May, you would have heard me say that our work is never done, as Resolution's never one to rest on its laurels. We know that now, more than ever, we need to work together to raise standards and services for families going through relationship breakdown. We know that things improve, and we know that practice changes. But it's not because solutions trickle down, but it's because people like you in this room demand what needs to be new and different. Change is achieved as a result of the energy with which you pursue those insights and improvements. How many of us have found clients to be more demanding over the past few years, and disputes becoming increasingly bitter as everything, not just money, is pinched? So, how many of us are able to find the opportunity and time for expansive thinking and pursuing agendas for change? We know it's all hard to fit that into our busy and challenging work days. And at the moment, the lines between home and the office seem to become increasingly blurred. So, with all of that in mind, what might be a better way? What could we think about changing? James, Karen and Rebecca had the unenviable task of each setting out their views on what they might do if they were Justice Minister. As Dave has said, you'll all have the opportunity to raise questions via Twitter as we go through. They'll be displayed on the screen behind me. And as Dave said, please make sure that when you tweet, you use the hashtag FPConf22. It's one of the hardest things to say. Each of our panellists will also be asking you to participate in the discussion, and at the end we'll be taking votes on the presentations, hoping to distill out from all the thoughts that have been thrown out from both sides of the floor, what are the points and proposals that need most action and support, and also which points and proposals would have the most impact. So this really is your discussion. James, over to you.
Hello, lovely to see everyone. Welcome. That's the question we're going to look at, but in true DR style, I thought we'd ignore it. I didn't get my A-level grades by answering the question. We thought we'd answer something a lot broader and then work our way back to that. I was starting with, what a mess, what are we going to do about it? I don't think it's just about lawyers, I don't think it's just about what the MOJ are doing. So I think we'll kind of need to distill things, and ideas are going to be welcome. I'm absolutely sure, by the way, that there is no public money. So solutions with large price tags being energetically advocated by this community is a total waste of its energy. Secondly, the solution is not moaning at Sir Andrew Macfarlane, who is joining us tomorrow. Mazza, moaning at Sir Andrew Macfarlane, seems to happen regularly, and I know I'm not alone in finding it completely excruciating to watch. There's probably no more decent person on the planet, and certainly it is difficult to imagine anyone working harder for this cause. The metaphor we've ended up with for sharing our ideas is not a new one. In fact, it might be Sir Andrew's. It is that of a river. We see it having three main stages. The downstream, slow-moving part, the silted-up, slow grind towards the mouth of the river, with its judgments, orders, and enforcement mechanisms. It's important for us here, given the influence it has on the whole of the rest of the system. In the middle, and of particular relevance to this conference, are the rapids, which is that turbulent part where separation takes place and the sliding door moments of process choice so often happen. And upstream from there is where Rebecca will lead us in this conversation. It is the schooling and the childhoods, the relationships and family life that come before this point of family change. So we have the early years upstream, the rapids, and the downstream towards the court process. For a long time, NCDR was ADR, the funky yogurt knitting alternative. Now we know that we are an overall system, with the court process struggling to cope and calling for help from the DR community and asking what this community needs. And with the opportunities for DR being very much informed by this destructive tendency of separating parents reaching too often for court. Too often as lips who fill the court slots and further slow the flow. And surely there isn't a solution. Beavers, banana, an aeroplane, or a fine Sauvignon Blanc, though perhaps the last. What we know surely is that we need to come at this from all angles and really work the watercourse and seek by bringing these endeavours together to change utterly the way it flows. And that is why we're going to try and be fairly quick. We will ask you too in your contributions to be the same. Julie will probably call you out if you're more than 50 seconds. I'm in trouble. We think of its most use is to gather the positive thoughts rather than to get stuck on any one particular proposal or other. And yes, of course, we will have to have a vote to agree the one that's going to achieve the greatest change for good. I would love it if we could treat that as the start of a mandate for this organisation. And so in terms of who's doing what, Karen is a bit more in the rapids and downstream. Rebecca's upstream, and I'm a bit more like a floating around in circles little paper boat in the middle. But what we want to do is to chunk this up and try and gather the ideas in different sections. Now, before tag teaming to Karen, I just want to cover off one part that I think sinks some of the radical solutions, which is why we need to put it centre stage in these discussions. And it is Article 6, sorry to be dull, and legalistic. Everyone is entitled to a fair and public hearing within a reasonable time by an independent and impartial tribunal established by law. And the way that was interpreted by Dyson in Halsey was here. Where we are told that we cannot compel parties to enter into mediation to which they objected. That would achieve nothing except to add to the cost to be borne by the parties, possibly postpone the time when the court determines the dispute and damage the perceived effectiveness of the ADR process. So in my view, and I'd love to be told that I'm wrong, we can't just have a solution to this which builds a massive dam across the river to force everyone into NCDR. Karen is going to take over at 2:47 until 3:02. Good luck.
Thank you very much. You've got the clicker thing. I've now got control of the holy clicker. So let's see if it will work. There we are. So that was my thought, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. It doesn't work, does it, people? I've got the easy bit, I think, on this particular stretch of the conversation. So, moving on, I looked at it. What have we got already? Using what we've got already and then looking at what we need to change. So I separated it into finance and children because I think the issues are different for our clients when they come to us. So looking at finance and the MyAMS, including all of the DR options, all of us have had MyAMS done where they've not been very good, have they? Really. There's been a 10-minute phone call and you get your certificate and then off you trot. I don't think that's good enough. I know that Elaine has got a cafe session about MyAMS being done properly, Elaine Richardson, and the new standards, so hopefully they'll help. But we could go back to that conversation. I know it's been had, but what about not just mediation, the other forms of DR that are in there as well? Why can't we pack those and make it compulsory for both to go and do it, both parties, not just the one making the application? Curating the information that we've got, or a course explaining. So I think a large part with our finance clients, they don't understand the limitation of the judge. They don't understand it's a broad brush approach. They don't get that it's going to take flipping ages and they could be living in the house altogether. They don't quite appreciate that sometimes, I don't think. And I think that having those sorts of videos or information about process, about how long it's going to take. So I'd suggested curating those. Now, James is going to ask me how I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to sell James' laptop to the highest bidder, and that will get me at least 33 pence. Next bit. Bonus. The next bit, the Part 3 management powers. So this is something, Karen Barham did a lovely piece on this and she presented to the Family Law Committee. We've got the Part 3 management powers. What about the judge using them a little bit more in anger, basically? Although not angry, I would say, but actually questioning, have you considered mediation? Have you considered arbitration? If not, why not? Why isn't it suitable? And recording it in a recital in the order so that it's clear that that is where the court expects you to be looking. And if you haven't done it properly, if the litigant can't answer the questions about what mediation is about and what arbitration is about, stopping the case there and then sending them off to go and repeat what they should have done properly the first time round. That's a bit draconian. You've probably noticed by that I've got 2 teenage boys. That's the way we roll in our house. So children, again, MyAMS again, and keeping it under review at each hearing. We've all got those cases where they start out with parents who really want to rip each other's hair out, don't they? And then attitudes soften along the way because they get tired, they get fed up. But how often does the court say, are we at a stage of mediation? Can we defer you to mediation? Can we send you out to mediation? Have you thought about arbitration? And again, curating the course and the video. Not only the court process, I thought, on this side, but also the effect on children. I find it fascinating asking adults who have been through a process of their parents divorcing, what it meant to them, how did it feel to them, and those adults can then articulate what they felt as a child. I didn't like being parcelled up backwards and forwards. I hated it when mum and dad shouted at each other. Thank God they got divorced because they were doing my nutting. All those sorts of things. That, I think, is really powerful for our parent clients to look at and to maybe prompt them to do their job of being a parent. So that's what I'd think there. The SPIP, making the SPIP mandatory, I think that's far too late in the process. I think that it's either right at the very end that they go, oh, and we'll do a SPIP as a final, as they're making the final order. We do have it in the Magistrates' Court in Essex, the People's Republic of Essex, I wish to. So, you know, but I think it's too late. I think that we've all got this front loading, and certainly with the new digital build as well for private law children, allocation, gatekeeping, triaging is their hot, sexy words right at the very outset of a case. Why not make the referral for a SPIP then? Take it as read. You know, the fact that they're actually in court means they can't communicate with each other and they need a little bit of help. So why muck around? Just send them both for a SPIP right at the outset. And I think that you know, you would hope that we could hang then other courses if we think that they would benefit from other parenting courses. Some of the excellent things that Rebecca's going to be talking about, that's a hook, isn't it? That's a point where they can be referred to go and do those pieces of work to make sure that we're using everything that we've got. So then I thought, all right, what can we change? What should we change? And I thought then, let's be realistic. What type of cases are we really getting? I know we all like to talk about high net worth and all the rest of it. Most of my cases are like shifting deck chairs on the Titanic, I have to say. And I think that costs and court fees are a really big issue for clients. And I'm not sure that we get across clearly enough, or it's not part of the day-to-day lexicon of how expensive these court cases are. And now, slicing the assets, discretion is great. I love discretion. I think it's the right thing. I like that we can tailor-make solutions. But how many times do you say to a client, they say, what am I going to get on such and such? And you say, it depends. That magic words, those magic words, it depends on the judge, the way the wind's blowing, whether they had a traffic jam, how they feel about you, how they feel about their part, all those sorts of things, because that's the human element that comes in on discretion. And I think that the discretion can create uncertainty, but then what do we do about that? Now, we've got Baroness Deitch, who suggested a formula, and chopping off, that's it, 50-50, off you trot. Now, I wouldn't go that far, but how about some reinforcing in plain English, some simple guidelines? We've got the needs report. What is it, you know, the how to define needs in a case. How many of our clients are going to read that? They're not going to read that. They like TikTok and they like Twitter because they're busy people. They need it distilled into plain language for what it means. And maybe we should be saying, well, you know what, anything you built up during the marriage, equal division, unless there's something that throws it off and it's got to be something special. And non-matrimonial is this and that and the other. Maybe we should be a little bit more forthright in the guidance there. And then hammering home the message. Financial disclosure, this is where we make our money, isn't it, kids? This is, you've always got someone who thinks they're being a smarty pants who won't produce their bank statements because they don't have to. But I think if we can get the message out, financial disclosure, just get on with it and do it, that actually causes most of the problems in many of the cases that I deal with. Because once you've done that bit, the looking at what there is, bearing in mind, you know, there isn't a magic money tree in the garden, unless it's Animal Crossing, then there is a magic money tree in the garden. But no, so I think that. What can we change for children? Who remembers the Kafkas conciliation appointments? Oh, come on, some of you were old enough to remember those. Right, they worked, didn't they? They worked. You'd get the Kafkas officer in, she'd have them both there, bang heads together. That was great, loved it. 80% of the cases for private law children settled, and you walked out with something done and dusted, because maybe they couldn't afford a lawyer, but they'd get the Kafkas officer instead, and she'd tell them what. Certainly one of the Kafkas officers in our region did, that's for sure. Child inclusive mediation. Should we be advertising this more widely? What about making it mandatory? What about saying for a child over, I don't know, 11, 12, what age you think, they must be spoken to by a mediator so that their parents can have some idea of what their behaviour is doing to their children? And that's not for children to make decisions, it is so that the parents can understand that they need to be parents first. And again, hammering home the message, parents need to parent. They don't rely on the court. And there's financial penalties for return customers. Now, I know that James has said the Article 6 point, so I'm going to say this. Liz Truss, she'll have us out of the Human Rights Convention within the year. Solid. So that's your Article 6 gone. Sorry about that. Yeah, she's not mucking around. Bye. And we've already got Section 9114. That puts a little bit of a bar on returning customers, vexatious litigants, or orders that say you must come back with a clean drug and alcohol test before you can make your application. So why not have money attached to that? Or some other condition, something to deter return customers. Okay, and then what should we consider for all? Again, I like Part 3 management powers, more oomph. More naughty step, that's what I'm thinking. Early legal advice, I'm very proud I've got a cat icon in there. Can anyone see that? That's for Kitty, putting money into a kitty for early legal advice. Good, isn't it? Yeah, I'm so pleased. So should we now be getting the corporate big boys putting some money in, a little bit on the practicing certificate? Is that what we think we should do to try and divert this car crash of families going to court and this disastrous outcome that they get? And what about then the last one, real consequences for the unreasonable litigant? Who's had somebody who's just been plain awkward on the other side? Yeah, and you just think, I'm trying to be really polite, but there's nothing I can do. I've made reasonable offers, push it all the way to court, and you were right. Which is a happy place to be, but a sad place for your client because they've spent loads of money on you. Although, there's upsides to that, isn't there, really? I mean, there we go. So those were my thoughts. Those were my ramblings. All cohesive with a nice picture of a kitty.
So how would we like to pick up on these? I mean, I think if we sort of started with the Miam as being the start of what is downriver, and then we'll come back to the rapids in a second. Does anybody have ideas that they are bursting to give us before they can kind of have a different conversation? And otherwise we can get straight into laying into Karen's ideas and give them a right old kicking. And there are talking sticks. In that case, I'm going to start. You just saved everyone. Well done. Just here. Oh, 1 second, because then you'll be out broadcasting to the nation. Well
Hi
done.
there, my name is Suzanne. I'm a local at Ellis Firma Solicitors in Beeston. Forgive me, I'm deaf in one ear at the moment with an ear infection. But I love what you're saying, couldn't agree more. But it's that bridging the gap when you get back to your desk. How do you kind of make all of this happen? If you had something on the resolution website where, you know, it's about reaching out to the other party, I think, a lot of the time, and, you know, it's that uphill battle if you're often educating the other side or the other party or somebody else's client. So if this kind of information is readily available on the website and we're all just being blasted with it via resolution, then it can wash down, you know, gradually, drip by drip into everyday practice. You know, that would make it easier to go DR instead of court, because awareness is everything as well. So yeah, it's just a thought.
Although we've been banging that drum for, you know, the last 35, 40 years, haven't we? And it's the culture hasn't changed. You know, the culture is still while it's coming to you, I'll just finish the sentence.
Well, the culture here, you are the informed. So we're like preaching to the choir. So this is quite an easy gig, isn't it, really? We're sort of preaching to the choir. But in the Law Society, the Family Committee represents 18,000 solicitors, all of whom have ticked the box to say, I do family law. Now, whether that's true or not, or whether they actually know what they're doing is another question. But I've said to Juliet before, I think that there's room for all branches of the profession to join up and work collaboratively on this, FLBA and ALC as well.
Sorry. In fact, it was exactly the point I was going to make, which is that actually I think there needs to be a lot more greater awareness and understanding within the profession first, because we're asking a body of people to send people to go and do MIAMs, and a lot of those people sadly probably don't themselves understand what happens at MIAMs and what the benefits are of the MIAMs. And I actually think that we might need to be quite controversial and perhaps be thinking about, you know, our own professional fellows doing things like MIAMs, going along and requiring them to do it and actually understand what happens at them.
Is our general view that we're pretty excited about the new standards from, yeah, I mean, to me, I thought they've done an extraordinary job in really raising the bar of the MIAM, and I have great expectations, and I'm trying to get to you.
Thanks very much. Hi, Elaine Richardson. I was just going to pick up on that point. That's really interesting, because in the chat, when we did the webinars for the new standards, the MIAM's new standards presentations, we're capturing questions from the chat, and one of them was about educating our fellow lawyers about what actually happens in a MIAM, because I think that there's widespread lack of knowledge out there.
Agreed.
While you've got the talking stick, can we just touch on this one about this idea about moving from MIAMs to IAMs? I'm not a fan. In my head, there's a sort of the proliferation of options is actually getting in the way of people making good decisions at the Rapids, that in fact it's a pretty brutal and binary choice, which is, can I sit down with this person and reach agreements or not? But are you in favour, as Karen is, of making it a broader process?
Well, first of all, just to point out, of course, I'm picking up on Karen's kitty theme, that I don't think we can use the word IAMs because it is a brand of cat food. And if I were going to choose a name, I'd be far happier with AIMS, just mix because I think that marketing could do a lot with that. One of the things that we covered in the working group was to ensure that when mediators conduct a MIAM, they are telling people about all the options. That staircase of options, I think that Angela Lake Carroll developed, that's a fantastic slide picture to show people. It would be a really good handout. But you know, that may be another hurdle that we've got to overcome to make sure that mediators have enough information and knowledge to talk confidently about that to people in a MIAM. I don't really mind what it's called. I think as long as we are doing the job, and I think, you know, we worked hard on the new standards to ensure that we captured everything. There are so many different elements of it, of what goes into a good MIAM. And I know that lots of people call it different things. I only call it a MIAM because I think lots of lawyers use it, and it's less confusing for a client just to call it the same thing. But it's that, I suppose I'm going back to, and this is really showing my age, the green form, the legal aid green form, early legal advice. You know, why on earth they got rid of that, I don't know, but I'm just being a grumpy old woman now. But
Oh, we've got a couple over here.
Tasha Bevan-Stewart from Blandy & Blandy. Just on a more informal tack, I get really grumpy sitting at my desk when I'm trying to do all this great stuff that we talk about at conferences. And you get a run of cases I've had recently where the opposite party is just maintaining the unreasonable position. You go to court, you go to FDR, and as Karen said, you win on the points, and you successfully be able to illustrate to your client that you were giving the right advice. And then the opposing party ignores everything the FDR judge says, and lo and behold, you're off to a final hearing. And you just go back to your desk and feel really grumpy and upset that you're swimming in this pool of people who don't seem to want to practice all the things that we talk about. And I think that's the support that possibly we all need, and if everyone feels like me, or some people do, of how do we really bring this to our everyday practice at our desk in the face of quite a lot of alternative practice that goes on out there.
There's one just behind you, but are you focusing, Tasha, there on the lack of consequences when you end up at your final hearing and you've been proved right.
And at
Because-
FDR, where judges just aren't coming down strongly on unreasonable positions.
Because it seems to me that when we look back at all the judgments, the senior judiciary couldn't be doing anything more in terms of banging that drum. It's what happens in the rank and file conversations at court where we never get cost orders, do we? We can be absolutely spot on with the numbers and we will not get a cost order. And it seems pointless to be doing the open offers that More J is encouraging us to do in MAP and so on, where they're actually not recognised at the end of the day. And I think that would be the one piece that we would like Juliet to be achieving in her discussions with the senior judiciary, is actually ensuring that there are some much stronger guidelines and encouragement. So actually, when we end up with our clients at the end of the day and our open offers have been ignored, that we know it's worthwhile appealing, because at the moment they're just exhausted and it seems like we cannot be sufficiently certain that it will be overturned on appeal.
I also think the way that you'll make sure that solicitors are explaining to their clients all of the options is by them having to tell the judge that that's what they've done. I mean, we file a certificate of reconciliation, don't we? That we've explained to our clients about reconciliation, do they want the services? But we don't say we don't file anything to say we've explained to them about mediation or arbitration or collaborative law or anything like that. We simply rely on the MIAM certificate.
And do you think your judiciary are actually informed about what is available in their areas?
I think it's patchy.
Let's have another one.
Really patchy.
Hi, it's Dan Beattie from Mishcon de Rare. Personally, I think it was a mistake to make MIAMS compulsory because it forced people into talking only about mediation. And I think you're absolutely right that it should have been made compulsory to deal with the whole suite of ADR.
And that's very much where the new guidelines are, though. We know that now, don't we? That actually the whole gamut of options are going to be put out there.
The other thing I think probably hopefully has been dealt with also with the new guidelines is the amount of MIAMS where there was boxes ticked without any evidence. You know, this is urgent, they're going to destroy stuff, and you know, there's risks of violence. And then when it actually gets to court and goes underway, there's nothing said about that at all. So people were abusing the MIAM system to tick boxes to get things done.
So that would cleave with Part 3 powers at the beginning and throughout. That would be a vote.
But has anybody come across a judge that's questioned it and sent it back?
I mean, certainly Karen Barham's conception of it was that there was going to be a review at every stage, wasn't there? All the way through the process, there was going to be, what are you doing on that front? And why isn't it working? And what should we do instead?
Yeah, I'm not sure that happens.
No, and wouldn't that be a great new thing? That's another one for Juliet. Kind of a long meeting. There's a couple over on this side.
Fine, can you hear me? Vicky Nottage from Family Law in Partnership, and I'm not going to heckle you, James. Thank you. On the point about education, we were both actually at the Family Mediation Association conference, weren't we, last week? And it was really interesting to hear Neil Barco from the Ministry of Justice asking if he could possibly sit in on a mediation so that he can have a better understanding about what actually happens. I don't have any sort of quick answers about bigger questions of education, but you know, we've got to start finding ways to explain really well what the DR options are. And you're seeping sort of upstream into Rebecca's territory, which is great, and we will get there. But I think this idea about cultural change and actually leaking into the watercourse more of a kind of understanding and a sensitivity to the options, so that it isn't just, well, the default is go to court at this point. Agreed.
Thank you. Mark Leeson from Bracious. I was just going to follow up the point that was made over there about the quality of practice. And yes, hopefully in this room, the standard of practice is outstanding. But there are times when you feel like you're banging your head. And one of the things that we've talked about is how we deal with lawyers who are running process. And that's all they're doing. So they're not thinking about outcome. So they will want to take the next procedural step, but you can't talk to them about where are we going. And that seems to me something about perhaps solicitors not getting advocacy experience in the way that used to happen when we practiced legal aid. And so it becomes an education point. But I think in terms of educating family lawyers to be the best family lawyers that they can be, that is one thing that we could do to improve the family justice system, so that we're not creating our own blockages. But I'm not sure that Resolution could do any more than they're already doing about that.
And when you're trying to reach out to get that conversation started, what's working and what isn't? What do you feel that you could be doing more differently?
I mean, I think the difficulty with that is it's extremely personal. So we have lots of relationships with family lawyers in our area that we can pick up the phone to and just say, what are we doing? What do we need to do? How do we make this happen? But then we have other lawyers who essentially you can't talk to like that because they don't know where they're going, so they don't want to have that conversation with you. They're very competently running process, but they don't know where they're going. So they can't have a conversation with you about how do we get to the point we need to get to, because they don't know where that point is. They're just running the process. They'll ask counsel eventually where that point is.
Does the open offer help? No.
No, I don't think it does.
Okay. We've got one right at the back.
Hi, I'm Matthew Richardson, Quorum Chambers. Just to start by strongly agreeing with that last contribution, by the way. I think the way that we train lawyers is fundamentally old-fashioned, and we need to start thinking about, well, what do people actually go for a lawyer for? It's a useful outcome, right? We don't actually teach lawyers to focus on useful outcomes. They focus on law and procedure. Anyway, the point I wanted to make was, if we're looking at starting from a premise, James, of we're not going to get any more money, do we need to start thinking about, well, what are we advertising to the public and what are we selling to them? Because ultimately we're selling a product, aren't we? And yet at the moment, the main product that we lawyers and legal professionals offer, most prominently, is litigation. And it's the worst option. And I've thought this for a while, like in how many other areas of life do you go to purchase an item or a product or whatever, a service, and choose the equivalent to litigation? It's like going into a car garage and being like, hi, I'd like to buy a car. Could I have the most expensive, most dangerous, slowest car you've got, please? That's what we're basically selling to people with litigation. And I think we as an industry need to package up identifiable products for people that have obvious benefits over the only thing that they're aware of. So I think a branding and marketing thing is something that I think some of us intuitively shy away from because it seems a bit crass, but I actually think it's really, really important.
Matthew, could you change, could Resolution change the way that it trains its members? Should there be much earlier courses on dispute resolution? If so, what would they look like?
Yeah.
Would you present them for free?
I think we could do something. Yeah, the sort of intake training that we offer is something I was involved in a number of years ago, but not more recently. So I'm not massively familiar, so I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what the kind of initial training and stuff that we offer to new members looks like. But I know from speaking to mini pupils and pupils who come through chambers and talking to them about the way that they're trained to be a lawyer, they're not trained to be a family lawyer. I wasn't trained to be a family lawyer when I went to law school. I learned to be a family lawyer starting with my pupillage and then by doing the job. And so I think a lot of family lawyers will come out of law school, go into a law firm, and then they need to start actually learning how to be a family lawyer. And inherently, that's a problem. So if Resolution as an organisation can help deliver something different and something additional, you're a family lawyer now, come and do this. This is how we do things.
Very good. And just while the talking stick's coming at the front, I think, could you just answer one question, which is at what call should people be able to do collaborative and mediation? Oh, it's all gone very quiet. Thank you. Start with 2 years. 2 years. Any lower? Any lower?
It should be 3.
3 years. Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you.
I would actually say 0 years.
I think you should be able to do it from the beginning of your career as a family lawyer.
Do you think that as a newly qualified person you could hold the room in a mediation forum? Would you have the confidence?
Not necessarily. I didn't mean necessarily practicing mediation, but training, doing the mediation training or some form of dispute resolution training.
Right.
Because
Training,
I think to pick up on how resolution could train their members, I think a lot of people bandy the resolution badge on their email footers, on their letters, and the content of that letter is then pretty hideous. So I think actually, whilst resolution offers a lot of excellent optional training, to have some compulsory training so that if you want to be a member of resolution, if you want to hold yourself out as a resolution lawyer, you need to have carried out this training so that you can actually demonstrate to clients and to other professionals that you operate in that way and that you understand the DR options available.
Thank you. I wonder if we should have one more and then push on upstream.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Gershony. I just had two things that I wanted to say in respect to my experience as a mediator. One of those is that I think that family lawyers who are not mediators are very worried about handing over their cases to mediators because of their bottom line. And the perception is that they're going to earn a lot more money and the pressures in their own firms to earn a lot more money from being litigious than they are from handing it over and feeling that if they hand it to a mediator, that's it. They've lost the opportunity of being involved, which may or may not be the case. And the other, from my experience, is that I'd say the majority of those people that come to me, many from lawyers, have no idea about what the other options are. I mean, I'm always staggered. They've never heard of arbitration. They've never heard of early neutral evaluation. And I'm telling them about that. But I'd have thought that the family lawyers ought to be informing them of that before they even come to me. Those were my two observations.
Juliet, you're trying to upset the timetabling.
I just want to say something really quickly.
You chair the organisation.
I think it's not just about other lawyers. I think it's about public perception, and I think the point of training and when you start telling those in their journey in the legal profession about the other options is before they qualify. And I know that there are lots of regions, resolution regions, where people from their committees go into law schools to tell them about all the options that are available. So I think that there is work to be done there, and I would say, that if you're a mediator or an arbitrator, then get in touch with your local college, get in touch with anybody offering A-level law, offering degree level, and ask to go in and speak to the students, because they're really happy to speak to real-life lawyers. They want to know what practice is like. And if we can tell them that there is a different way, that there is a better way, when they're starting off, before they specialise, then that has to help. We get them before they learn how to do it wrong.
They always ask me how much you earn. The students always ask.
I've never ever been asked that.
Could we...
Sorry, I'm messing up your timetable.
It's a useful point, and thank you. If we could move on to Rebecca's slides, that would be fantastic. Thank you. I think it's all over to you.
Thank you. I try and do very little lawyering. I'm majority mediation and DR, so I've got the upstream gig. I'm not sure who the dead fish is, but we need to be swimming upstream. So we have to start waiting for the money tree to flower, essentially, and we know there is no more money coming. So I thought I'd start off by looking at what politicians are doing at the moment what the Ministry of Justice is doing. And I was at the FMA conference last week as well, where Neil Barco spoke to us, and he said that the wait, we already know this, for a final hearing is increased from 30 to 46 weeks. The FPR committee, to pick up on one of the other points, is looking at the MIAM regime, is looking at the exceptions, geography being an obvious point, because you don't have to have that 15-mile radius from a mediator any longer, and I suspect some of the other exemptions will also be considered. The focus is very much about pathways and diverting people from court. There's been a lot of investment, but it's generally been allocated to judicial sitting time. But we know that's too late, and more needs to be done. We've got the Pathfinder project running in North Wales and Dorset. It's still in its early stages. I don't have any figures about evaluation yet. It involves enhanced safeguarding at a much earlier stage, which provides engaging with a wider range of professionals, and it's looking at the longer sustainability of court orders to avoid a return to court, so it's doing a lot of education work as well. It includes a case progression officer who is allocated and works with the parties. I think there was a pilot like that some time ago in Manchester with CAFCAS. We've also got the MOJ voucher fund. That started at £1 million. It now stands at 8.1 million. It's going to run until at least March 2023. There are some signs it might continue, but we didn't get any wink from Neil Barco about that. But I know there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to lobby for that. As of the 16th of September, 11,266 vouchers had been issued, which is about 170 a week. And 7,835 bills had been paid, which amounted at that point to £3.353 million. There were still around 2,800 vouchers active at that time, 17,000 still to issue. So there is still a little bit of funding there. £500, depending on where you're from, you know, it may pay for a session, it may pay for a bit of one, but it's better than nothing. I think the crucial thing for the MOJ, and the one thing that they've lacked over the years, is data. The scheme provides quite a bit of data. Mediators have to complete a data collection return before they're able to submit a bill. So we have to do that before we're allowed to be paid. The current evaluation shows that 77% of participants in the scheme have had a complete or partial agreement, 72% of them being led away from the courts or moved out of court. We should probably be speaking to the powers that be to find out what data family law professionals could give. If they lack data to back up funding, why aren't we providing that? What could we provide? Let's ask them. Let's ask the FMC what they could do. I suspect that Resolution could be quite heavily involved in some of that. We could devise some form of data collection. We could have a data committee. We could keep numbers of people that we've signposted away from our firms into mediation or arbitration, or E&E, or private FDR, or whatever it is. But we could be doing that, and we could be providing really valuable data to the MOJ. In terms of legal aid, we know that it's under review, and I think it was announced yesterday or the day before that the 2018 contract has been extended until August 2024. But from where I'm sitting, I suspect the likelihood of proper funding is slim. In 2013, there were 13,983 legally aided mediations. In 2022, that had reduced to 8,067. Interestingly, the FMC has calculated that in the year 2022, there were 331 FMCAs, there's lots of acronyms, in 132 legal aid firms, I run a legal aid practice, who received £9,468 in legal aid income on average. It's nothing. Through the voucher scheme, they had an additional £3,679 worth of income. So that voucher scheme has been really valuable to legal aid practices. Does anybody remember the HSSF mark and the Sorting Out Separation website from a few years ago? Yeah, well, that died a death. In fact, I think we were asked to stop using the kite mark. But the MOJ is looking into better information to support separated families, but we just have never had this kind of joined-up approach. Helen Adam has suggested an NASPP, a National Association for Separated Parents Programmes. Could we be doing that? Could we be coordinating that rather than waiting for that to happen? Waiting for somebody else to do it? Could we be devising a kite mark or an accreditation scheme, giving the public some reassurance about it? Is that something that resolution could help with, or lawyers? What could we do to help with that? Reducing parental conflict, the DWP initiatives that my firm was involved in, they work. There is a lot of research in this area. So we were involved in the 2014 Help and Support for Separated Families Innovation Fund, 17 funded projects, talk-based mediation, therapeutic support, informational advice, or contact-based interventions. And there was a massive improvement in scoring. They used something called a parental alliance measure, or certainly we did, to score people when they came into our service, asking questions about things like how well do you talk to the other person? What do you think the other person would say about you? And then we scored them at the end. And I think almost without exception, they were either the same or improved. So when you do work, when you have these interventions, they are successful. And then in 2018, that led on to the Reducing Parental Conflict Challenge Fund, and we were part of that round as well. We changed our project and involved children, so very much the child-inclusive things that Karen was talking about earlier on. Some of our cases at that stage involved a family conference type meeting at the end. If we had showed some positive outcomes, and if the children were up for it and the parents were up for it and we were safeguarding and doing all the right things, and those were really successful. We had some really great outcomes, so we know it works. It's well known, we all know that frequent, intense, poorly resolved parental conflict can affect children's emotional and social development, their educational attainment, their employability, their physical and their mental health. Our project that we ran in 2018, the evaluation showed that we had saved Portsmouth County Court district judges 3 weeks of time because we were able to take them away from the court. They were referred out by the court to our programme. That was 15 days' time. In all, it works. Sadly, there's not much funding now for that to happen, but we've had the research. On the digital side of things, one of the participants was the Good Things Foundation. I don't know if any of you have heard of them, but certainly in terms of educative work, I'd really urge you to look at the videos that were created by them that looked at behaviour modelling, and I've got a link up on the slide later on. They're really well worth a look. If you work with low-income families or workless families, they're free, and they are really powerful videos. Wouldn't they be good on our new NSSPP website? So there is actual evidence of change when we use interventions. The effervescent Helen Adam also did a presentation at the FMA conference. The Family Solutions Group identified 6 key areas, which I've summarised up there. We can't really do much about the first one, but we can do something about the remaining 5. And I'm going to go on and talk a little bit about those. So, intervention is instrumental in reducing conflict, but as with a lot of initiatives, they come when parents and caregivers are already struggling. So swimming upstream, how could we influence children so that they learn better strategies and techniques to take with them into adulthood, and they know how to model relationships, and they learn what to do when things go wrong. Our curriculum, our school curriculum, currently mandates that pupils should be equipped with ways to manage the impact of parental separation. However, the content of these programmes can differ given the amount of teaching time that's actually allocated to the PSHE lessons. At Exeter University, Professor Anne Barlow and Jan Ewing looked at developing the PSHE teaching slot. They've developed a suite of resources to support the curriculum. They're free. If you have school-aged children, you could contact your local school. You could tell them about this. The lesson plans and accompanying videos are built around the United Nations Convention, particularly their right to have their voices heard. They need to know that. How will they know otherwise? In the lessons, the pupils would explore the key rights that are afforded to young people by the Convention, and they would and discuss leading young activists who are getting their voices heard nationally and internationally. They build on that in later lessons and sensitively and in a non-stigmatising way consider and normalise the range of emotions that young people might feel when their parents separate. Pupils learn about young people's rights to information, consultation, and, where needed, representation when their parents separate, and the sources of support available to them after parental separation. And as I say, they're free. The lessons are already prepared. There's a video. They'll send you laminated copies if you ask. So that's a great resource. But a lot of schools don't know about it yet. In terms of language, this is also an area that needs further work. And as lawyers, we are particularly at risk of using jargon. I've used it already in the last 10 minutes. I've talked about NASPP. Think about CAFCAS, FDA, FHEDRA, SPIP. We can't seem to shake that off. We are probably still guilty of writing letters in which we don't really consider the impact of the language we use. Joe O'Sullivan's book is a great book, so that should be given to every single client because it's written in plain English. It uses language that almost all potential clients could understand. Helen Adam is about to publish a paper on language, and they have identified the 5 Ps. Plain English. Don't use jargon. Make it personal. Remember, for your clients, this is their life. Keep it proportionate. Use problem-solving language, and let's have an end to battle language. And lastly, focus on positive futures and not past recriminations. I think what I want to say to all of you, and to me as well, I'm involved in this, is to learn about what language works best for reducing parental conflict. Use it and own it. Have a look at the website that Emma Nash has launched with the Family Law Language Project. Read Helen Adams' paper when it arrives. Read and reread every letter that you send. Think about the 5 Ps. Remind yourself about who your audience is and what the ultimate goal is. This is to help families in need. It isn't to win. Simple changes that you can make are things like I wish. So when you use the word you did, you didn't, you always, that's a very accusatory way of talking. So in mediation, we use I wish. I'd really like it if you could tell me if you're going to be 5 minutes late when you pick up little Johnny, rather than you were late. So tiny little changes in language will have really positive outcomes. It's quite clunky to begin with, but we spend quite a lot of time going through that with clients in mediation sessions. last week, Andrew McFarlane asked mediators to think about our branding. So yeah, really on point with some of the questions and comments earlier on. If the average man on the street doesn't know what mediation is, and he was talking about mediation in particular, they often think it sounds too soft, like a hurdle to jump, or too much like couples therapy. I suspect the same is probably true of arbitration. If they don't know what mediation is, they're probably not going to know what arbitration is either. We probably have a problem with branding. And if lots of people, if other people and lawyers, fellow lawyers, don't know what it means, is it the message? Or is it the message not getting out there? Is it the message itself? Is it the branding? What is it? Because something isn't right. So we ought to maybe consider how we sell these things, how we sell these services, who we're selling to, and what kind of language they would like to hear. That's something else that we've got a responsibility for as lawyers. There are lots and lots of things that we can do. Andrew McFarlane and Neil Barco last week, both of whom want to help, although their hands are tied in a much bigger way than ours are, they both said that they'd never seen a MIAM. Why not? Nor of their staff, nor of most of the judiciary, certainly in our area. Invite them. Let them observe. Make a video of a MIAM. Let them see it. Why are professionals, why do they not know what we do? So we have to know about what we're asking our clients to do, especially with the MIAM rule changes that arrived this month. If you're a mediator, reach out and invite somebody to a MIAM. Invite them to observe. I mean, there are clearly confidentiality issues and consents, but invite them. Talk to your colleagues and other practices and set up hubs. Find the thing that will work for the clientele in your area. We do a lot of legal aid work. We have a mixed practice, so what might work for my area might not work for yours, but find something that will work. Make sure you know where your local SSFA is. If there isn't one in your area, why not start one? The Kent SSFA has created a model that they can now roll out for a really modest fee. It's not difficult, and it's a really great website. I think they said it was something like £1,000 last week. It wasn't an awful lot of money. Or could Resolution be providing some kind of integrated pod, a model for a pod that we could run in our local areas, remembering the holistic and integrated approach. I think that my fellow members probably support the idea of a national register for resources, and I think that we should be taking the lead on this. It's an impossible task to keep up if you're in your own local area. Things change all of the time. So, in summary, I would like us to educate ourselves and our children at ground level. I would like us to contact schools and let them know what resources are available right now for nothing. I would like us to think about inviting a judge or an MP or another lawyer that doesn't do much DR work to a MIAM. Data, 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 and I think Resolution can help with that, and we can devise things because we can then prove what we're asking for and prove that it works. Find your SSFA. I can't see what it says on that last bit of slide there. Oh yes, and make a pledge. So my last one, thank you James, my last one was make a pledge. I wondered really radically if when we submit our Resolution membership submissions every year, we could have a list of pledges and we could sign up to something that we're then kept to. So it's just an idea. I don't necessarily know what those pledges could be, but I suspect that there would be quite a few people who would be willing to do something. And
financial pledge, or this is a pledge to perform?
No, a call to action, a pledge to perform a task.
So Juliet would expect us all to have brought a judge to a MIAM or something similar?
Something along those lines. There could be a whole list that we could create.
She could make our lives a misery.
I've been told that the President has recently been invited to sit in on MIAM.
Ah. So that's me, and I would really, really like you to vote for my ideas. Thank you.
So we've sort of moved right up to the source of this river at the moment, and we're trying to change radically the direction in which it rolls towards the sea. Has anybody here got other ideas about how we're going to change the culture, or can we quiz Rebecca mercilessly on her reducing parental conflict, what she learned from that, and how we're going to roll those ideas out more widely? That would be the two ways in which I might go. If no one's got any contributions, he says, waiting for a hand. There is one. Oh, sorry, Karen's got one.
I can add something. So one of the other hats that I wear is as a chair of trust board of a multi-academy trust where we run 6 schools, and at the moment the themes very much in education are about attendance, but they are also about well-being. So within our trust we've put together a well-being charter for staff and for children, and listening to Rebecca speaking, I think that there is scope for that to be extended to community well-being as well. And there's no reason why trusts like ours couldn't offer parenting classes or help with parents beyond what we do already with challenging behaviour or issues how to handle separation. And they could become, in many ways, our trust becomes a hub of the community for certain training and so on. And it's quite easy to tack that on. So that's interesting.
Hi, I'm Kerry Griffiths, Willowbrook Lifestyle Financial Planning. Rebecca, I wanted to pick up on your point around branding and mediation. The clients I work with are vulnerable and they find mediation a place where they don't feel held. They don't feel held by their legal team. And they're not always aware that they can continue to have a divorce coach or financial planner alongside them. And I think in terms of branding, we are very much getting our clients to a place where they understand during litigation that it's a team approach, but I don't feel that they are aware yet that in mediation it can continue to be a team approach.
Yeah, that's interesting. Certainly where I practice, we do operate a team approach. In fact, we're members of pods and all sorts, and we have this kind of integrated way of working. But yes, it is about the branding, and I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the alternative is at the moment, but somebody much cleverer than me, who's a specialist in marketing, presumably could come up with some way of, or we could write to EastEnders and get them to do a storyline there, because I think that would be a fantastic way of people understanding what we do if they did it properly.
There's a couple of questions. Just while that's landing, I don't know if Angela, you'd also be able to touch in on this. I've had a bit of an issue about whether we do too much trying to sell a model and too little listening to what our clients need and then saying, oh, we've got something that will sort that. Is that a possibility?
I've just been sitting listening to this with a great deal of interest, and I think this may sound very controversial, but I do really wish you'd stop talking about options and listen. You are experts, whether you're a mediator or a family lawyer or an arbitrator, whatever you do. People come to you because they're making a distress purchase for the most part. They want advice and help. When you just reel off all these wonderful options that you have, they can't hear you. The branding is wrong. They don't understand the words. We've called them things that just make it incredibly complicated. Some of you may remember Simon Hughes as Junior Justice Minister. He said at a meeting, I've never forgotten it, what a pity it's called mediation, he said, because no one can understand it. If you just called sorting it out. I haven't spoken to a single client of mine for probably nearly 4 years where I have used any of those words. I listen and then I say, it sounds as though it might be helpful for you to sit down with someone who can help you both to have a conversation. It sounds as though it may help you to be supported by each of your solicitors and sit down together, and so on and so forth. Because I think, you know, we're coming at it from when we were a single gateway, where we had to tell people this is the way it works and this is the only way it works. it isn't like that anymore. And we should really be listening to people first, and then helping them to design the service they want, need, and can afford. And use all of the available services, join them up for the benefit of the clients. And to do that, we need to work together. So, yeah, I do think we need to make some changes.
Some bursting for some questions at the back. Thank you, Angela.
I don't know about, yes, I think this is on now. My name's Graham Lyons from Family First Mediation Service. I've had several complaints from fathers about domestic violence and not being able to get before a judge because of the costs where their partner has been supported by legal aid. I wonder if there's a way round that, and that is to use a questionnaire in future where the complaining party has to fill out a questionnaire that will go before the judge, and equally then it's a similar questionnaire to the other party. Then there might be less judges, I'm told, that reject the evidence of the fathers.
Thank you. I'm conscious that we've got 10 minutes and we're somehow going to have to work out how to vote for these and what we're going to ask Juliet to pay for and what we wanted to pay for most.
I'm only chair for a few months more.
But there are some quick fire contributions. Should we try and keep it to sort of like 30, 45 seconds or something?
Very briefly, I'll try and make it brief. I'm on the steering committee of the SSFAK, and I just wanted to say that all we've done is bring all of the organisations in Kent together that support separating families. And the thing that was shocking about it is who knew there were so many, and we'd never spoken to one another. And actually having that opportunity to speak to one another was both incredibly rewarding, and I think gives us an opportunity to actually provide the public in Kent a much more integrated service, because we are now talking to each other and we can refer to the right people. So I think it's an incredibly rewarding thing to do, and if you can get involved in the SSFA, please do. The next step, I think, and because we've done the website, but I hope the next step for us is to get into schools, because I think that's where we need to be. And we've already had that discussion, and I think that's what we'd like to do next.
Thank you. I think another next step would be that actually the SSFAs are proliferating, but what we need is the centralised one that provides a central hub for everything, which we will call the Juliet Hub in honour of the person who arranged its funding. Has anyone else got any other thoughts? One over here. Oh, I think it's coming.
I just had a couple of questions for Rebecca, if that's okay. Just firstly, on the schools programme, could that not be provided to the Department of Education directly, rather than us having to go around with the links and providing it to all our local schools?
I don't know the answer to that and how you would get into the Department of Education. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, my gut reaction would be yes, why not? But the how, I don't know.
Yeah, into
Regional Schools Commission is probably your best answer. Your Regional Schools Commissioner for your area that the schools are in.
That's one idea or question. And the other one was the voucher scheme. Great that it's applicable to mediation, but can it not be applicable to legal advice? Because getting people advice at an early stage to help them understand what their case is and what the chances are of actually running this all the way, which they might want to do, couldn't that divert so many more cases?
Yeah, and yes, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the problem is when they leave your door with their agreement that the voucher may have covered, then what do? Because not everybody has a lawyer, and not everybody gets referred to mediation by a lawyer. So yes, I think some looking at what they do with it afterwards is really important, but we just don't have the data for what happens when they leave us.
Any more for any more? Or should we try and somehow bring this together? There are some slides called ending, I think, which we may or may not manage, but we'll see. So when we look downriver, and I won't have caught all of these. Thank goodness Juliet has. The downriver stuff, we had cost orders, i.e. consequences for open offers. We had thoughts about containing discretion, which I'd love to talk about whether we could really do that, whether we could, I almost feel sick even talking about adopting the Baroness Deach initiative, but maybe we do need to look that one full in the face. Whether we need now guidelines so that you know what's going to happen when you issue your application under Section 8. That would be extraordinarily different, wouldn't it? At the moment, there's probably a lot of people thinking they might have a go. So cost orders containing discretion, I think we have voted for conciliation appointments. We've got Part 3 powers all the way down the road, and case progression officers. What's the one that when we come back in a year's time, we're going to say, oh, we really should have nailed that and we failed? What's the one that we really think we can put in some energy? I've got number 6, invite your judges along so they know the options. Anybody got any views? Anyone thinks we need to ensure that cost orders are going to be made? Nobody, apart from me. I'm going to die on the stake of cost. Oh, 2.
I want Part 3. I'm going to go off for part. I want greater, more with Part 3 management powers.
Sort of roaring all the way through the court.
Yeah.
If you have the judge going, could they also go for James and cost orders?
They might not like him as much as they like me.
Possibly. Probably. Sorry, you would...
Yeah, I think one of the biggest barriers to ADR is that we're all just lawyers practicing the law, working in firms with billing targets, and we need to know that the service we offer the client will bring them to the end, and the only service that guarantees that is the court process, because that is what's written into the law. So if we had more meaty Part 3, for example, where it's written in more detail with bigger guidance about how ADR operates within the court system, then we can do more of it, and so will all the other practitioners, because it's law. So, for example, like if Part 3 says, you've got to make sure that you've had this, like this lady said, 2 or 3 sorting it out meetings, and if you've not had those meetings, you can't come to court, or there'll be penalties or some sort of repercussion. If it was law, everybody would just do it. We can't change FPR in the law because that is the law. We're lawyers.
You're sort of reaching out for the Sir Andrew McFarlane. Sorry, overtalked you. Sir Andrew McFarlane actually was doing that in Birmingham, wasn't he? Sort of probably 20 years ago when he had the Birmingham guidelines. Perhaps we need to reach out for some of that. So I think it's a bit of Part 3, Juliet. I think that was the sense of the room for the downstream part. And when we reached to the mid-river stage, we've obviously got a strong piece of advocacy from Angela around talk needs, not services. But did we have other parts? Ones I caught were narrowing MIAM exemptions, both parties at MIAMS, SIM, child inclusive as a norm. We want hubs to share ideas, I think. An expectation of joint MIAMS, and a lot better communicating the cost of the court option. But I think that's more Rebecca's problem, the upstream change of culture. But I don't know if anyone thinks that we've missed out something massive at the point of the rapids where people actually make their decisions.
I think early advice, access to early advice. Okay. The number of cases when we had green form, I do remember it was green form, that were diverted away from the court through simply using that.
In the last couple of minutes, if we could move on to the last one. Fantastic. I think free Joe O'Sullivan for everybody. I think we kind of all seem to vote for that all the time, don't we? A Minister for Families appears to have got lost somewhere. Instead of having the Minister of Justice, we actually need a Minister of Families because that's the only way that the whole river is going to be curated. Change in our language seems to be a responsibility for all of us. We haven't talked about the norm of holistic working. I thought the question was quite weighted towards lawyers as opposed to family professionals much more broadly. My sense is that if we don't start working with our other professionals, we're going to struggle a little bit. We definitely get a big vote for the SSFA, don't we? And Juliet, writing out a cheque for that, seemed to be enthusiastically adopted. And also, I think we need her to fund standards for parenting programmes. Not quite sure. Could we have a vote on who thinks we'd rather that she was funding a hub, an informational hub that parties or that parents could go to? Who gets a vote for the SSFA model? Big one.
You can't get onto the hub unless you've got the accreditation for the thing in the first place.
Very good. We had a little smattering, I think. And then who really wants standards for our parenting programmes? I think both was the answer to that, Juliet. That's right, please. We've also need our resolution data committee. I can see we need lots of information and others are gathering it, but I think we need to be purposeful in what we're gathering it for.
I think there might be more data collection going on elsewhere. I think that may be upstream, even higher upstream, but where the trickle starts.
Thank you. We're all going to contact our schools for our PSHE, and we're going to ask for a pledge each year. Anybody got strong views on what we've missed out there? Yes, we missed one. You're about to get the closing word, so be careful. It's got to be amazing.
Oh no, that's a bit dangerous. Kathy Sazer from Sazer Law. Just following on from what Resolution can do, we spoke earlier about mandatory training when you join Resolution potentially, and that training being ADR training. My view is, following on from what Angela said, is actually there should be training on how solicitors do their first client meetings, because that's crucial and we all do them differently. And if we're not covering off everything properly and we're not listening, but we're trying to give a list, we're siloing, we're doing all the things that Resolution are trying to move away from. And I certainly do my first appointments quite differently to others, I think, when I talk to my fellow lawyers. But as lawyers, we don't talk about how we do our first appointments.
It's interesting, isn't it, that the more senior you get, the less feedback you get. You know, we actually, too often we're doing these on our own, aren't we? I have the privilege of having people in and telling me what a complete car crash I tend to make of them. So I think that I quite like that idea.
That training would be extremely useful, not just to new lawyers, but existing Resolution members. And I don't see why it shouldn't be mandatory in the same way that we were talking about. You know, we can tell everybody what the process options are. You can read a book on it. But what you can't do is have that practical, you know, that, dare I say it, role play, which everybody hates, but is so important when you do any form of training, whether it's mediation, collaborative. You know, they're the important parts of the training where you sit in that seat and you practice. So that's the last word, I think.
Why does that have to be just Resolution lawyers? Why would it not be just general family lawyers? I can't remember how many thousand family lawyers you said there were in total, but I mean, why is it just us?
Well, Rebecca, it would be great if we could get to all of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree.
That's the problem, isn't it? How do you do that through the Law Society?
I mean, this is a problem that has
such.
such.
Actually practicing family law anyway, even though they say they do. They might have one case a year and not really understand what to do with it.
Yeah.
But certainly as an organisation through Resolution, that's something I would say probably could be, you know, could be a real thing that could be put in place, dare I say, not easy and quickly or cheaply, but something to be considered definitely on the mandatory training side.
Thank you. I think you've all given us quite a lot to deal with. It's going to be a busy year, and good luck to whoever's coming in. Thank you very much. Well done. They were very good, weren't they? Very impressive.
Thank you for chairing it, and thank you for taking part. It's been really, really good. It's the Le Café next, and that's an opportunity for you to sit down with your colleagues in a more informal atmosphere and discuss different topics. We've got 5 cafe sessions. The sessions are going to take place in this room, but in order to facilitate that, I'm afraid you have to leave. But the good news is that there's tea and coffee and soft drinks outside. We are still not able to check into our rooms. You'll be able to do that after the cafe sessions. We will not be coming back together again, but we do assemble in the room outside for drinks at 7:15, and the dinner is at 8. Thank you all very much.